Hello, we're here with Dr. Jeff Haymond, the Dean of the Cedarville University Plaster School of Business. Dr. Haymond, we're talking about some exciting things today. I don't know anyone more passionate about economics and free enterprise than you.
Well, certainly it's exciting to those of us that like economics. So there's a lot of people that may look at this and say, oh, economics, that's not for me. But wow, when you think about what the impact of economics is, it's really tremendous. Nobel laureate Robert Lucas, for instance, once said, when you start thinking about growth and the implications of what growth can do to the world standard of living, he says you can't think of anything else. And so that's kind of the story about economics. If we get economic policies right, it makes a world of difference to humanity. And so, yeah, I get excited about that.
Well, I'm thrilled to be chatting with the CBF crowd here. But I wrote down a few questions here I'd love to answer, because even as an entrepreneur myself, I have much to learn about free enterprise and economics as well. But why is free enterprise better than any government-directed economy, whether that's socialist or just big government?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to tackle that. But first of all, the most important is probably markets work. I mean, let's say markets deliver the goods. No one debates that. Karl Marx didn't debate that, even, the founder of socialism, communism, and kind of thing. When Marx was in awe of the productive powers of the market economy, he just thought that was historically at that point, and we could do better with socialism and communism. But everybody acknowledges that capitalism and free enterprise, which is a better way to think about it, actually does deliver the goods in terms of lifting people out of poverty. The Nobel laureate Milton Friedman once said, there's never been any other system known to man by which the masses have been lifted out of poverty other than free market capitalism, which is basically largely free trade and free enterprise, the ability to produce. And let's look at the recent history about how markets have delivered. Over the last, since 1990 roughly, over 1 billion people were lifted out of extreme poverty, as defined by living on less than $1.25 a day. I mean, that's they're really destitute. 1 billion people. That's just a stunning amount of humanity on our planet that were lifted. Now, they're still very poor. Let's not say they're not living large in American middle class, upper middle class lifestyle. But to go from that level where they are beyond just barely subsistence to that, and that was largely done through free trade and embracing free markets. Principally, the two countries would be India and China that emerged out of really bad ideas to somewhat better ideas about markets. And so that's kind of the starting point we have to say. Materialist outcomes are not the only thing that matters, but boy, they do matter, right? When we think about, even Jesus, what he did when he addressed somebody's problems, he always addressed the problem first and then dealt with the spiritual implications follow. So the material things matter, the material world does, and free enterprise delivers the good. Then we could go a little bit further with how we think about this. And this will be just the little bit of technical that I get. Yeah. Probably most of our listeners are aware that economists have their supply and demand diagrams. And that X marks the spot. That's what we like. We like to get to equilibrium when everybody's basically happy with the outcome. Well, markets have the incentive for any producer to produce a good or service as long as the price that people are willing to pay exceeds the cost of the inputs to provide it. And they're going to do it. In other words, if I want what you have and I'm willing to pay you pay you enough money that it covers more than covers your cost, you're going to do it. And so that creates value. Every time we have an exchange, value is created. And so the more exchanges we have, the more value is created. And the market's given incentive to create more of those exchanges as long as the price that an entrepreneur gets is greater than his or her cost. In a similar way, on the other side of that, any good or service that costs more to produce than it's worth to the public, that's the market's going to punish them with losses. So that's a real important thing. And it gets better than that, because this is the technical thing. Yeah, but let's think about the implications. If we don't produce things that the cost of the resource inputs are greater than the the desire of the people to buy it, then those resources are available for solving some other problem in this world that needs to be solved. So efficiency is not just about, some sort of hyper thing that is going to make people more money. Efficiency allows us to have resources to solve other problems. And there's lots of problems in the world. And the market system of profit and loss is precisely that mechanism, which means that we're going to get a really good outcome, and the most problems are going to be solved, and the most overall social benefit is going to accrue. And so that's a real benefit of markets. And then a final thing that we ought to at least touch on, and I'll be glad to elaborate if you like on any of these things. The alternatives just don't work, right? I mean, it's pretty clear with socialism. We'll always have the advocates of socialism say, well, all those failures we've seen, whether it be the USSR or Cuba or North Korea, that's not real socialism. You've probably heard that. That's the advocates say we haven't done it yet. Or we haven't tried it the right way. But after a while, after failure, after failure, after failure, after failure, after every time it's tried, and what actually comes out of the attempt does not look like whatever their utopian idea of socialism, you have to start questioning the system itself, because it simply doesn't work. The death of millions leading to totalitarianism and other things, but economically it just doesn't deliver the goods. And societies that have embraced socialist and big government tendencies tend to do far worse. So if we go the less extreme, not socialism, but just very big government. Let's look at a hybrid example, kind of Great Britain after World War II.
Okay.
They didn't really embrace socialism per se, but they embraced a socialism where the government nationalized all the heavy industries. And England was the sick man of Europe. And finally, when Margaret Thatcher, they just couldn't, they just kept falling further and further behind the productive economies of the free world. And so they had to give it up. I mean, India, we talked about their coming on and helping, being part of that 1 billion people lifting out of extreme poverty. It was precisely when India left behind kind of their embracing of socialism and leading to markets that they started really significantly improving their life. So those other things just don't work. We could take it one step further. You can look at it there's a number of good agencies that put what we call the Economic Freedom Index across the world. And we've got a similar kind of rating in the United States as well. And what you see is very much so. The countries that embrace free enterprise are always at the top.
Wow.
And those that embrace really command and control policies or really heavy-handed government, which is exemplified on the Freedom Index with less economic freedom, they do much poorer. And so, historically, like Hong Kong was right at the top. Well, Hong Kong's actually fallen off its top slot because of, communist China taking it over and having restrictions. They're not doing as well as they used to. And so these are kind of tendencies we see. You see it here in America, the so-called red states that are very, very progressive and have heavy-handed government involvement, Chicago, Connecticut, New Jersey, they tend to do worse than, say, Texas or Florida and so forth. So those kinds of things, markets work. The final thing I do want to say this because this is important. We can touch base on it also. A problem that we have that is just pervasive is people that do not like free enterprise. We're going to get to that a little bit more in a moment, but I want to mention it here. Is they have what's known as the nirvana fallacy. They imagine a utopian outcome that's possible while criticizing free enterprise. So maybe we'll touch back on that. We don't want utopia against reality. We want utopia against utopia or reality against reality whenever we do what we would call a comparative system analysis of what's going on.
So I hear you saying that even the proponents of other systems like Karl Marx, they still saw the value of free enterprise, and they couldn't deny it.
They couldn't deny the productive capacity. And most of the big critics, we'll get to some of the criticisms. I think you've got that lined up for me in a moment. But the criticism of free enterprise just leaves people starving is not one that's a valid criticism.
So why is free enterprise a better economic system than socialism from a moral or biblical? We talked about some of the practical, but what about the moral?
Yeah, for sure. And that'll get some of the criticisms as we see in just a moment. But let's take it biblically first, right? Because I that's kind of the morality that I'm going to bring to the table. We need to look at what we're created to be. I mean, we're created as image bearers of God. And image bearers of God, we were given certain responsibilities in the Garden of Eden. We saw Adam was given the command to cultivate and keep the garden. Adam and Eve were told to rule and reign over creation, this cultural mandate or creation mandate, dominion mandate, however you want to talk about it. And the point is, individually, we are given responsibilities by God, delegated to steward his creation well. And so free enterprise provides that social space for us to be what we've been called to be. You know, many of these other systems have a collective process which really limits the freedom of individuals to fill their God-ordained responsibilities. I mean, the extreme case would be communism, where you weren't even allowed to choose your vocation. You were just told, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go be this cog in a wheel. Whatever you may think about humans, whatever you may think about the Bible, in the Bible, you are not simply cogs in a wheel in God's economy. He has a definite plan for individuals.
Wow.
And indeed, I assert that he grows people, or in religious terms, he sanctifies people as they make choices even in the market economy. And that freedom aspect is really important.
That's good. Wow. Why are free markets often attacked? What is the biggest criticism that you would say?
Yeah. Well, I'll save the biggest for the last. How about that?
Okay.
So the first criticism, let's go back to Karl Marx. He was in awe of free enterprise productive powers. The Industrial Revolution, he couldn't deny what was happening. Literally, the world was being transformed. But he decried what's called the anarchy of production. And I'll just make it in kind of today's lingo. I mean, everybody's racing to have the best electric vehicle, for instance. Is Tesla the solution, or is it going to be the new Ford Mustang, whatever their EV is, or the Porsche, or whatever? He would say that hey, we've got all these people trying to do one thing, just pick the best one, and you could have used all of those resources for solving some other problem. He called that anarchy of production.
Wow.
And in one sense, that's a really good criticism, right? But in a much more fundamental sense, when we think about it, we don't know what the best solution is absent the market process. It's precisely the competitive forces which he sees as he saw, as incredibly wasteful, which are asserted by a free enterprise proponent such as myself as an essential part of determining what the best solution was.
Yeah.
We simply don't know. The market will tell us whether we were right or wrong.
Wow.
And we will have to adjust to the market. And so he didn't like that. So that's kind of one criticism that Karl Marx had. Wasted resources, but we would deny that that's even a waste, because that's an essential part of coming to the right answer. We could look at Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, the father of modern macro and the big government kind of state. Keynes wrote his work, his general theory, in 1936 in the throes of the Great Depression. And his basic criticism was, look, markets don't seem to work. Why have not the labor markets cleared? Why do we not have? Why do we have 30% unemployment, which they approached in England for a long period of time, right? And so he said we've got to have big government to come in and spend. That's another thing to make up for lack of demand when we're also psychologically we're either bullish, extreme bullishness, or we're extreme bearishness, and we need the level-headed government to come in and step and spend, and that would be how we would manage the economy. There are a couple answers to that. First of all, what Keynes failed to really appreciate at the time, which we've only subsequently understood, is how much the government really messed things up in the aftermath of World War I, especially the international monetary system and our own Federal Reserve and their policies contributed to that. And then there are many bad policies, which every time the markets could try to adjust, yet it was another hand grenade. Like for instance, raising taxes. Tax rates on the richest people in America were raised from 25% to 63% in 1932, in the midst, the depths of the Great Recession. Whatever you may think of progressive politicians who want tax increases, they would never suggest we need to not quite or 2.5 times tax increase in the middle of a recession. That's not the time to do it. We know everybody agrees with that. When we don't need deflation of 10%, we need to have kind of a stable monetary environment and things like that. So that's one thing. But the long run catches up with the Keynesian theory pretty quick. To be fair to John Maynard Keynes, he didn't have as good a political economy view as he should have, because Keynes would have said we should spend when the economy's a little bit running south, right? But we should cut back and run surpluses when the economy is good. Of course, the politicians love to spend all the time. They'll take that spending when the economy is south, and they'll keep spending when it's good as well, as we've seen with the national debt of all countries it applies. So those countries, the bigger the government gets, tend to grow slower. Again, it's more of a technical thing, but they simply don't work as well to provide the goods and services over time.
I love this. This is so good. So why is profit good?
Oh, that is a great question, but we need to hit one other that I forgot, so forgive me. Yeah. Probably the most important criticism now. Nobody really criticizes markets for those kinds of things today. The more important thing is the moral criticism. And people want to say that free enterprise is immoral. And the principal reason why they would think that is they say that markets are unfair or unjust in the distribution. And that's a reasonable criticism that leads to unequal outcomes. And that's that debate between whether we want some sort of equality kind of based system or a merit based system. And currently in our country, there's still a strong support for merit at some level, which is why you start to see some of the criticism say, hey, really, the market isn't really about merit. It's about luck or kind of cronyism. But here's the thing, when you start looking at it, you see the people that are incredibly wealthy. First of all, look at all the wealthiest people in the world today. Where were they or their families 50 years ago? It's all pretty much newly created wealth. And whatever you might think of Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, pretty much everybody that's looked at them, they're pretty brilliant, and they all worked pretty hard. And so markets have rewarded them. In some cases, we might think obscenely, but it's in proportion to the way the market perceives they have benefited the world. We might disagree with that. A lot of people might disagree. We don't like Facebook. Some people love it. Yeah, right. But in terms of what it's meant to our economy, it's a pretty big hitter in the economy. And so he's created tremendous value. And here's a case in point. And I may be a little bit off on this factoid, so forgive me, but it's real close. I wrote this in a paper many years. Steve Jobs, when he died, his net worth was something on the order of $6 billion. And I think about $3 billion of that was Apple. And at the time, Apple was capitalized, market capitalization was like $300 and something billion. So as wealthy as Steve Jobs was, the value he created to the world as in the market capitalization of Apple was far greater than he got. And what was that capitalization of Apple at the time of his death really a reflection of? It was a reflection of how well Apple would continue to serve the marketplace in the future. Because all market capitalization values are always about the capitalization of the future earnings of the company. So when we think about that, we see that those individuals, they capture a large amount of the wealth, but what they do socially is far greater in terms of the contribution.
I got my iPhone right in front of me. I got my Apple Watch. I mean,
for sure.
So on that point, though, let's jump back to then profit.
Sure.
Why is profit good?
Well, profit is essential for first of all, it's essential to have a market work. I like profit. Let me be even more negative though. I like profit, and as an economist, I like loss.
Wow.
Because profits and losses are signals that you are either serving well or you are serving poorly. And we need that signal because every entrepreneur, and I hope we get to talk about entrepreneurship in a minute, but every entrepreneur has a great idea. And it's really at least great for them, right? It's the idea that we solve a problem they care about. The question is it a question everybody else cares about? And even if they care about it, can you do it well enough to do it with the fewest resource inputs that, again, leaves all these other inputs available to produce other things? That's kind of what loss helps us understand. If you're not doing it, we want you to stop. Markets say, stop. Don't go any further. Don't waste any more scarce resources. But on the other hand, for profit, man, profit is saying, yeah, we like that. Markets say, come on, do more. Other competitors, stop doing it the way you're doing it. Do it the way these people, they're making these really high profits. We see this today. NVIDIA, I mean, they're making these GPUs that's just like so tremendously valuable. And what's AMD? What's Intel trying to do? They're trying to go as fast. The market's telling Intel and AMD, don't do what you're doing. Do what NVIDIA is doing.
Yeah.
And that signal is a powerful allocator of resources. Markets have that profit and loss signal. And again, back to those other systems, they don't have that incentive structure to allocate resources in ways that best serves what the broader community wants to have done.
Oh, that's so good. Well, on the topic of entrepreneurship, something I'm very passionate about, why is entrepreneurship so important to a market economy?
For sure. In economic terms, that's one that gets back to this kind of comparison of economic systems. Even if socialism could somehow have worked, the reality is it without the actors, the entrepreneur, doing the innovation, they would have been stuck at the steady state. You could imagine the Soviet Union might have stayed in the 1930s kind of level of technology. Kind of their failure, they always said, well, we'll just use the best technique. Well, how in the world would you know what the best technique is? And the entrepreneur is precisely that innovative driving force. They bear the risk. They're the ones that are going out and attacking existing ways to do it. They may be right. If they're right and they risk their capital or other, entrepreneur venture capital that goes behind it, and they're right, they'll be handsomely rewarded. But if they're wrong, they bear the cost, not the rest of us. So they act in our behalf to make a better future. If they're right, yeah, they'll get rich, but we'll be much better off. If they're wrong, they lose. We're no worse off. So that's one of the tremendous benefits of entrepreneurship, is the source of all innovation. And again, that profit and loss signal, which is one of the reasons why economists, for instance, are really sour on price controls. And the government saying, you can only charge this price. We need those signals, and we need the profits and losses.
Wow.
And it's why economists really certainly this economist gets really upset when we see bailouts. Not just because of the unfairness of it, but it sends the wrong incentive to future efforts. And you're going to continue to we know you'll continue to subsidize all the bad behaviors.
It's almost like participation trophy, right?
It's like participation,
right? Nobody wins.
For sure.
Why should Christians be excellent entrepreneurs? They often aren't. Why not?
Yeah. I would love to see, and that's what we're doing here at the Plaster School of Business. You're leading the charge as the Barry Chair of Entrepreneurship in the School of Business. We want to see more marketplace leaders. There's no doubt about it, because we believe that entrepreneurs have an outsized influence on the culture. Let's ask ourselves a question. What would the world look like if Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos were a Christian? I think it would look a lot different. And I think it would be a better place if that were the case. So we need to create more of these entrepreneurs. And really, though, when you think about what makes a really good entrepreneur, there are a lot of kind of characteristics that seem to be captured. Entrepreneurs are willing to take a little bit more risk. They seem to have a little bit more prescience about what the future is than others. And when you think about all of those factors, especially the risk bearing. Christians should be willing to step out boldly on behalf of taking risks more than anybody else. Why not? If you are a Christian, you believe that there's a sovereign God of the universe who's behind everything you're going to do. In his providential plans, he's not going to, as Scripture says, David says he hasn't seen the righteous begging for bread. Right?
Wow.
You don't have to worry about it going south. It may go south. That's not saying that God's going to make every Christian successful. What the Bible does promise is, in the midst of things going south, he's with you. And so we should be boldly going out and trying to improve the world, because entrepreneurs are all trying to solve some key problem. And these problems of the world gets back to that Genesis mandate to rule and reign over creation and to be excellent stewards. So I think, to the extent we're not at least entrepreneurially minded in what we do trying to improve this world, we're not fulfilling God's commands for our lives.
it's like Hebrews 11, the hall of faith.
Yeah.
I mean, which person didn't take risk there? They all
Absolutely.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think this was a crash course on markets and free enterprise. I learned a ton. I just feel like as CBF, Christian Business Fellowship, we all need to be more in line with these types of concepts because, just to close this out, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs recently who are saying, with AI, we might have basic economy now, like basic income, where everybody's handed money. And what do you think, just as we close out some of that stuff? You're it's a recipe
of disaster. I wrote a blog post. Sorry, he put this in the last minute riff.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog post and I used very strong language. I says, this is a lie straight out of the pit of hell.
Yeah.
Universal basic income. We are created to create. God, work is a good gift from God.
Yes.
We see that in Genesis chapter 2. It's before the fall. And the idea that we want to subsidize somebody so they do not have to work is just a very horrible thing.
Yeah.
It takes away dignity, personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is a real key prerequisite for having personal dignity. When you earn your own bread, you're going to have a significant different self-image. It's one of the reasons why we see people that are on these entrapments of some of these welfare programs have higher rates of drug abuse, other kinds of things, because they're trying to escape from they're really denying their image bearing and God-given capacity to work.
Good.
And so I'm a really big downer on universal basic income.
I love this stuff. Well, Dr. Haymond, thanks for all you're doing at the Cedarville University Plaster School of Business and sharing with us today.
Thank you. Good to be here with you all.